Back here now on the show for the last segment of today's episode, talking a little bit more of an open discussion that I wanted to bring up from the comments I saw from Micah Parsons recently. I want to give a little bit of context. Previously, where I was going with this segment, I wanted to bring up that past discussion we had when Austin Rivers came out and said that you could take 30 NBA players currently and they'd be more successful playing in the NFL than 30 NFL players playing in the NBA. That got a lot of people riled up. I gave my opinion on it. I thought Austin Rivers was out of his mind. I thought it was the other way around. But regardless of that, now it brings up another topic I wanted to throw out here for you guys. And regarding baseball, Dodgers pitcher Tyler Glasnow appeared on the Chris Rose Rotation podcast recently, and he reacted to Micah Parsons' comments with C.J. Stroud. They were, I want to say I'm going to forget now. I want to say they were at a Braves game or something like that, and Micah reacted to a question. The original question to Micah was, if you played in 162 MLB games with 5 at-bats every game, how many hits could you get, after those 162 games? To which Micah Parsons responded by saying, I think I could get like 200. Then he clarified a little bit with what he meant by 200, and he said, I meant like I could go about 200, batting average of 200. Like average 200 is what he said, and Tyler Glasnow reacted to that, and he sort of gave his thoughts on it, and he said if he had 500 at-bats, 5 hits, maybe 5 hits for sure. I think once he steps in and sees like a big league pitcher, he'd be like, oh, never mind. I think it's good to have the confidence. I appreciate the confidence, but 5 hits, maybe. And I sort of did the math a little bit on that and averaged it out to what it could mean in 162 games. If you times that by 5 at-bats per game, you have a total of 810 at-bats. To get 200 hits, like Micah Parsons sort of said there, he'd be batting around 250, so it kind of checks out. If he got 200 hits out of the total 810 that he would have, he would be averaging and batting around 250. Hopefully, if I did that math right, but I'm pretty sure I did. But anyway, he would be batting 200 if he got around 200 hits, but I don't think there's any way in the world that he would do that. There's no way any football player currently right now could do that in baseball, and that made me think of that Austin Rivers conversation like I mentioned to start this, and now made me think of the question, who would have a harder time transitioning to that other sport? Would football players have a harder time going and, say, playing half of the MLB season and being somewhat successful? Would they have a harder time of doing that? Or would MLB players have a harder time playing a full NFL season and being somewhat successful in that area? My opinion on it, thinking of that question from Micah Parsons' comments, is that I think football players would definitely have a harder time, or actually, scratch that. I think MLB players would have a harder time in the NFL than football players in the MLB, because, and only because, we've already seen some football players at the highest level playing quarterback that were drafted to the MLB and were pretty decent baseball players, from what I've seen, at least from college or their high school highlights. The first couple of names that come to mind are Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, as some of the quarterbacks that were pretty involved with baseball growing up. And I think if you put them out there, maybe not pitching, obviously, because I feel like that's a whole different realm, a whole different dimension of the sport. But hitting, if they were out there, could they get a hit or a couple hits or bat at least 150 or 170? I think they could do that. I don't think I know, I don't want to discredit any baseball players or anything like that, but if you've played baseball a little bit growing up and you see how talented these guys are and their love of baseball, and if you get the hang of it a little bit, the timing and stuff like that, I want to preface it again with saying that baseball, hitting a baseball is probably one of the hardest individual things to do, because you could do everything right and still not get close to getting a hit, especially with guys throwing like 190 feet away from you. It's almost impossible to do it. I did it once when I was like 10 years old, and that pitch was coming like 60 miles an hour, and I thought that was the hardest thing to do at that point in my life. So I can't imagine what major league pitchers have to do. But again, I think with what I've seen from Russell Wilson and guys having that prior experience, I think it would come a lot easier than if you take baseball players right now who, no offense, aren't the greatest athletes out there in one of the most athletic sports that you could think of. I think they would struggle a lot more. The only one I could maybe see making the transition a little bit easier would be Aaron Judge, but that's just because he's about like 6'7" or something like that, 250 or 40 pounds, something like that. But then other than that, I didn't think of many other baseball players that came to mind, or that I've seen at least, show something out there, show some great play in football-related activities or something like that. You usually see some guys out there playing basketball or something like that, or going out there and hitting a baseball, playing in these softball games or something like that. It makes you think, oh, wow, they're pretty athletic. They could maybe do the other sport if they wanted to. They could have some success, and that's where, that conversation with Austin Rivers came up. But you don't see a lot of baseball players, or I haven't seen them, going out there making some crazy one-handed catch, going out there just playing football or something like that for fun. Once you put the pads on and helmet on, I think it really turns into a whole different thing, much like baseball, once you see someone throw 100 at you. But I think there are just more guys I could think of right now playing football that would transition easier than baseball players would in the NFL. But I thought that was a pretty neat thing that I saw that Micah Parsons said. Obviously, saying it pretty sarcastically, but it made me think of that question. Similar to that basketball question, but now changing it over to baseball. I would love to know what you guys think. Is it a clear answer? Am I talking crazy? Am I being crazy disrespectful to baseball? I've never played baseball, so I never wanted to for all those reasons that I mentioned. But that is where I stand on it. What Micah Parsons said, what Tyler Glasnow had to react for it. I thought it was all in good fun, but I think baseball players would have a harder time transitioning to football than football players would to baseball. That's just what I think. Let me know what you guys think of my response and what are your overall thoughts on this discussion. But with that being said, that'll wrap it up for us on today's show. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Make sure to follow the network also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X for more of the network's content outside of sports as well. If you want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube for a ton more content out there on YouTube Shorts, individual segment videos, and all that stuff you can find on those two YouTube channels. And as a final reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL discussions and football conversations around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me, and I hope to see you guys all back here again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go